Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. As we get closer to winter, the chances of us experiencing a power outage are only becoming greater. Storms can knock out power for days, and many times this happens on the coldest nights of the year. Then there's always a chance that something more serious could happen that would result in even longer power outages. Over the past couple years, I've been refining my family's energy plans so that it'd be useful during common weather events along with longer-term disasters. And to do this, I've tried to make our backup power plan as well-rounded as possible. It consists of multiple power generation methods, energy storage, and then heating and cooking. Setting up our plan in this way will help us maintain a high level of comfort and convenience during just simple power outages, but it'll also let us do more critical tasks during something more serious, like if the lights never come back on. The first part of our energy plan, power generation, utilizes both solar and traditional fuel-based options. Solar's been my main go-to pretty much since I got my first solar generator in 2021, and what you can do with one will depend on the size of your power station. I have a few different options from EcoFlow here that I've been using for a while, and I'd like to thank them for sponsoring this video. Small ones like this EcoFlow River are a good choice if you're on a budget or primarily concerned with keeping small electronics running. If you have a set of solar panels, you should be able to keep things like your cell phone and any other rechargeable devices like flashlights running through the duration of whatever you're dealing with. Power stations of this size are also nice if you want to take them camping because they're lightweight and they don't take up a whole lot of room. If you want a little more power, then something like the River 2 Pro is a good option. It has 3 times the capacity of the base model River 2, meaning that you'll have 3 times the amount of stored energy. You'll be able to handle more devices at once and then also go a longer time in between needing to recharge it, and that's nice if you have a few days of stormy or cloudy weather. You'll also be able to power some larger appliances and tools with it since it has a more powerful inverter. But if you want to power larger appliances like a refrigerator, then you're going to need a power station with at least a 1 kilowatt hour capacity. Here I have the Delta 2 and the Delta 2 Max, and both of those are going to be powerful enough to run pretty much anything in your home that uses a normal 110, 120 volt AC outlet. So you're going to be able to run your fridge, your box freezer, your microwave, bunch of other kitchen appliances, and then other things like power tools. While the Delta 2 Max does have a more powerful inverter than the Delta 2, the main practical difference between them is their capacity. The Delta 2 Max just by itself can store 2 kilowatt hours of energy, but you can expand it up to 6 by adding 2 extra batteries. The regular Delta 2 has a capacity of 1 kilowatt hour. You can add 1 extra battery to it to get to 2. So the Delta 2 Max is going to be able to power more for a longer period of time. And if you're wanting something to use instead of a gas generator, then having something with a larger capacity is definitely what you want. When I first got the Delta 2 Max, I did a test to see how long it could power my fridge and box freezer together, and it came to around 18 hours. And 18 hours is a lot longer than the average power outage. Most of them only last for around 4 or 5 unless there's some sort of big storm or other major event. So really the only time that I get my gas generator out now is to test it to make sure it still works, and then also to let it run for a little while. If you don't have a solar generator yet, then now's a very good time to pick one up. From now until November 30th, EcoFlow is having a Black Friday sale where you can save up to 58% and get a free camping light with orders over $600. They're also doing deal of the day offers on Amazon from November 17th to the 27th. You can use this code to get an additional 5% off along with a free gift. And EcoFlow is getting ready to launch their new Delta Pro Ultra, which will be their largest solar power option yet. If you order now, you can get a $1,200 limited super early bird discount on it and its associated bundles from now until January 8th, and you can find links to all of those in the description below. And aside from just being convenient, there are other reasons why solar power stations are my go-to option over my traditional gas generator. First is that they don't produce any harmful fumes like carbon monoxide, so you could hook one up right next to your bed and not have to worry about it. Solar power stations also have pure sine wave outlets, which makes them safer for sensitive electronics. Many traditional gas generators, especially the larger non-inverter types, produce what's called dirtier power, which could cause power surges, which may damage some components. Then, solar generators don't produce any noise. That's nice since you and your neighbors aren't going to have to listen to a constant hum from a gas engine, but it's also beneficial from a security standpoint since you're not going to be drawing as much attention to yourself. Even more quiet inverter generators can be heard from a considerable distance, especially if other things like cars aren't running. But probably the biggest advantage to using a solar generator is that they don't rely on a finite fuel source like gasoline. With those traditional fuels, you're eventually going to run out of them if a situation lasts long enough. However, where I live, sunlight's abundant most of the year, which means that I should be able to keep my essential devices running for several years. Just remember that a lot of what you can do with a solar generator will be limited by your ability to recharge it. So because of this, you want to maximize your solar input as much as possible. The next part of my family's backup power plan involves using a gas generator. Mine is a mid-sized dual fuel option that can run on both gasoline and propane, but since I'm using solar power options now, its main job is to support those. While I do have plenty of solar panels, we may have to deal with an extended power outage during cloudy conditions, and having a backup method to charge a power station would be very useful. This would also be very practical to do because of how fast EcoFlow power stations charge from an AC outlet. Even the biggest one that I have, the Delta 2 Max, can charge back up to 80% in just over an hour, but that will take longer if you're using one or more extra batteries. By using that generator just to recharge my power stations, I'm able to make my fuel storage last much longer because I'm only running it for a brief period of time and only as needed. Now, it would probably be better to use an inverter generator for this purpose since that'll help protect the electronic components in my power stations, but I don't do this very often and my generator has a built-in surge protector, which is better than nothing. EcoFlow does have a fuel-based generator that's designed specifically for this purpose, but this is the one I got and I make it work. Then also, if I know a situation could last more than a few days, I'll just move anything important from my fridge into my box freezer. By only running the box freezer, I'll drastically reduce the amount of power that I need. Where I could run both the fridge and box freezer for 18 hours, if I'm only running that freezer, I can do that for 3 days in between charges. Now, if you have a large enough generator and a transfer switch, then you could run pretty much everything in your home, but doing that's going to require a lot of fuel, and most people aren't going to have the money or the space to store fuel in those kinds of quantities. If I could do it over though, I probably wouldn't buy this particular generator since its electric start feature is a major weak point. Because of the way that the generator is designed, if you don't have a battery or your battery has died, you'll only be able to pull start it on gas, and the battery I had died even though it was on a maintainer. Now, I could jump start it on propane, but that's not really something I want to rely on. Of course, if you can afford it, you could always opt for a whole home option, and when most people think of this, they think of a standby generator. And those are nice since they'll kick on automatically if you lose power, and they'll run pretty much anything you have, but they're reliant on natural gas utilities. So if we're dealing with some sort of widespread situation, even if it's just like a regional weather emergency, you could lose access to those utilities and, as a result, your generator as well. However, there are solar power options that can run an entire house as well. The Delta Pro Ultra that I mentioned earlier can be expanded up to 90 kilowatt hours, and I'll be showing a version of it at the beginning of next year. The next part of my family's energy plan is energy storage, and this is done by using different kinds of rechargeable batteries. The most basic of these are rechargeable nickel metal hydride AA's, AAA's, and D cells. We use these to power various things around the house, like lights, fans, and radios, but when picking those up, be sure that you get the ones that have a low self-discharge rate. Inteloops are a good example of this since they can be stored for 10 years and still retain 70% of their charge. Another thing we like to use for energy storage are USB battery banks. These work well for charging things like cell phones or other rechargeable devices like flashlights. Then a battery format that a lot of people overlook is power tool batteries. These are what I used before I got my first generator because in addition to running tools, you can also use them with different kinds of lights and fans, and if you have a power source like this one, you can also charge up USB devices. You can get them with fairly large capacities, and if you're like me and you're already using power tools, then they're very practical. And even though a solar generator is mainly designed to collect energy, power stations can also store energy for long periods of time. Since I've been doing this for a while now, I keep one of my older power stations in a Faraday cage at all times. This will give me a substantial amount of energy to start with, and also since I have a set of panels protected, I'll be able to keep that and any other devices I keep in that Faraday cage running even if things get really bad. The next part of my family's energy plan involves heating and cooking. While I could use a generator of some sort to help me with those tasks, a lot of the times the appliances that do those things are big energy hogs. So because of that, I tend to use fuel-based options for those and save my generators for other tasks. For heating during short-term emergencies, buddy heaters are nice since they're portable, produce a good amount of heat, and can run on either 1-pound propane bottles or full-size cylinders. The main downside to using a buddy heater, though, is that propane's a limited fuel source that I use for other things as well. So if you're in that kind of situation where you're using multiple devices with one fuel source, you really got to be careful how you use your reserves. Fortunately, it doesn't get dangerously cold too often where I live, and when it doesn't stay that way for very long. So if we were to experience a really bad winter storm and for some reason needed to use our generator more, then I'm sure we'd be fine if we just bundled up and huddled inside. We would just be a lot less comfortable. But if my wife and I are able to build a home one day, I would definitely want to incorporate either a wood-burning fireplace or wood stove. Then, because I try to use my propane for heating and running my generator, I keep a butane stove on hand for cooking. Those also tend to be safer to use indoors than propane, so really the only time that my propane stoves get used is if I'm going camping and I need 2 burners. But for longer term situations, I won't be able to use any of those after I run out of fuel, so because of that, I also have cooking options that run on natural materials. For boiling water, I have a Kelly Kettle Base Camp. This is their largest model and can boil up to 54 ounces of water, which will allow me to remove any biological contaminants or just heat it up for cooking. When I got it, I went ahead and got the full kit so I could use it for small cooking tasks as well. Then for larger cooking tasks, I have this rocket stove. Like the Kelly Kettle, it can run on sticks and pine cones, and it also works very well for boiling water, but it's a much better choice if you want to do something like grill meat since it can handle those larger things like grill pans. Both of those options produce very little smoke, which is good from a security standpoint, but just remember that if you're cooking something, then people are probably still going to be able to smell that. I also have a solar cooker, which would allow me to cook various things without having to use any man-made or natural fuel source. And like I said earlier, where I live tends to get a lot of sunlight, so it would be a viable long-term option. But if we were to experience some sort of serious long-term disaster, then having a solid energy plan is just one thing that we would need. So if you want to see things that you should stockpile for long-term survival, then click here. Or if you want to see things that I keep in a Faraday cage at all times in case things get really stupid, then click here. Once again, I'd like to thank EcoFlow for sponsoring this video. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.